Welcome everyone to Heart Talk, coming to you live from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah in Malaysia. Heart Talk, as I've always said, is about heart-to-heart conversations with inspiring personalities from different parts of the world. And one such personality today is going to change your life as much as it does mine. And the reason is being that life is all about interacting. As a surgeon, I interact with my patient. And today we're going to talk about the whole world of interacting between a writer and a reader. Now, in the medical field, we always go back to the spirit of the 1900s, when the birth of plastic surgery started, and we talk about Harold Gillis. Until today, I use his instruments with his name on it. And the first thing we were taught was to go and learn the history behind that instrument and who crafted it. And this is the whole history of how you enter into the spirit of that era. Now, as a doctor, we are always trained, do no harm. And always at the end of the 6 years of training, it's about making a diagnosis and giving the right treatment. So too with this whole philosophy, this whole phenomenon, this whole craft of writing. And this is one of my series, I think it's episode number 7, which talks about how do you really think through the process of the mind behind the mind, the thinking process, and try and touch into the spirit and the culture of writing and being a good writer. So my guest today is exceptional because she's an award-winning developmental editor. She's a book collaborator. She's a ghostwriter and whose clients have earned more than 55 book awards and bestseller rankings. Her name is Cristen Iris. She specializes in working on high-impact nonfiction with academics, physicians, researchers, and I can tell you one thing, she's truly a professional in what she does. And I call her the book doctor, especially in the field of forensic, because she knows how to really get into the heart of the matter, which is a matter of the heart. So I wanted to think through with me as she talks about certain issues of writing, and which you won't get anywhere else, I promise you. And with a mountain of experience, I can tell you one thing. If you want to be a writer and you want to do your memoir and you want to be good at it, Cristen Iris is the one to meet. So join me to welcome Cristen Iris coming to us live from Idaho. Welcome, Cristen.
Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here and get to talk to you again.
Cristen, I tell you that the more I talk to you, the more I keep on telling you, and it might happen, I might end up being your neighbor because it seems to be a really touch-go phrase between the both of us. But I want to tell you that I really enjoyed my last conversation with you, which is going to be really enriching today. And I want to just start off this whole podcast with you, Cristen, and take you back to the time when writing was an era of new mechanics, the new evolution of a revolution in putting pen to paper, in putting thoughts, and how thoughts become sentences and they become ideas, and then they end up with innovative changes and life-changing, processes. So I want to take you back, and I was looking through how to get a thumbnail for this podcast, the video when it's completed, and I came across a picture of a writer in the name of E.B. White. And I can tell you one thing, Cristen. I mean, my introduction with you might be a little bit long, but I want to get the listeners to feel where I'm coming from, because you're going to take both of us there. And it took me about 10 minutes. I kept staring at the picture, every part of it. It was taken by a lady by the name of Jill Cristens. And it's amazing that, he's 77 years old, white hat. He's sitting on a wooden bench. He's got a wooden table with 3 planks put together. And looking out the window, he's got the ocean there. He's in his boathouse. And this is in Upper Brooklyn in Maine. And, he's got a wastepaper basket. And he's in a world in the spirit. The picture captures the spirit of that time, the culture behind writing. And it's amazing that today the typewriter is replaced by the computer. There are no more wastepaper basket. It's all delete. And as we move into this transition of AI coming in and chat GPT and bot and don't know what else is in the process, I want you to talk to us about the ethos behind writing. What is the writer thinking about? Because at the end of the day, as I said in my introduction, it's an interaction between the reader and the author or the writer. And so I want you to help us capture the culture of the era, the spirit behind. I mean, before, even if we talk about that, what got you into this world of writing? Something must have triggered that inner part of you, because it's really about the inner self that comes out. And when you listen to 55 other editors or writers and you're walking with them and all that, you're going really deeper than a page to be able to formulate and articulate it. So talk to us about the intangibles that produce good writing in memoir. Confidence, enjoyment, intention, integrity. How do you put all these qualities and core values in to make a good book that will persuade the reader to buy it?
Yeah, I think when I think about that picture that you're talking about, and going back to the before times when we didn't have computers and that kind of thing, I think what motivated writers back then was the craft. And it was an expression that they could not do. And the difference between that and what I see today, especially in the nonfiction world, is that there's been this big push in nonfiction for, business people, write a book because it's going to draw attention to your business, it's going to help you earn more money. And so that's not always bad. And I certainly work with a lot of clients that's part of what they're doing. But the motivation is different. And the way that those authors approach the writing process is completely different. So I love to work with somebody who has more of a craftsman mindset and who is interested in the nuances of things. And if we think about craftsmanship from like a woodworking perspective, a craftsperson is somebody who's paying particular attention to how the joints of a project, the joints of a drawer fit together, not just that they're for precision, but for beauty as well. So there's just this attention to the writer or to the actual craft, and thinking about it, the fulfillment that the person gets from doing an excellent job and developing their craft, but also thinking about how it's going to be used by the person who purchases the piece of, the bureau or the whatever it is that the craftsperson is making. So there's this, when you said in your introduction about me about the heart of it and the heart of it, right? To me, that's the difference between a writer and an author. And I make that distinction. Anybody can write a book. And once you write a book, you get that author status, and that's great. Nobody can take that away from you. But a writer is a different animal. They're not in it for status, for the money. They're in it for the craft and for the conversation that they have, that their heart has with the heart of the reader. And the way that that's facilitated is through words on paper.
Wow, that's powerful, because that distinction is seldom mentioned or thought about, because we kind of like interplay it and use it anytime we like, the writer and the author and all that. And to be able to go back to that spirit, that culture at that time, and then 30 years later, somebody else writes another book about writing well, and they learn from that. And then 30 years later, I'm sitting here, or 40, 50 years later, I'm sitting here with Iris, Cristen Iris, and says, I see you, Charles, Iris to Iris. But tell me, how important are those intangibles in the sense of, for example, let's take them one, confidence. I tell you something, this writing of my memoir is huge task. I mean, every time I sit on it, I find myself getting up to go and have a drink, the kind of thing. Any excuse, where's the wine? Where's this, because, and I tell you why, as you said, and I love the way you say, it's a craft. And it's just like plastic surgery. I mean, there are only about 40, 50 kind of plastic surgeons in this country. And it takes you so many years to learn the craft. So have we lost those important intangibles in the process? I mean, you mentioned just now about those editors trying to get a book out because it's so business oriented today, especially ebooks. I mean, how do you get an ebook out there and feel who's writing it? It's all about how to, as opposed to what am I doing wrong in my life, and how do I get that part? So talk to me about the credibility, the trustworthiness, the authenticity. That's a big difference, isn't it, between nonfiction and fiction, especially in memoir? Is that a way to put it?
I think I'd necessarily say that.
How do you put those things in?
I think that novelists are more driven by a desire to tell stories and to entertain people. So I think that there's less of a profit motive there on that side in general. Yeah, in general. But there's a really funny thing that people who don't know the industry, you can kind of test and easily see who knows anything about the publishing industry and who doesn't, because there are still a huge number of people out there who think that the way to make a lot of money is to write a book. And writing a book is a great way to lose a lot of money. So there are some novelists who come into it thinking that they're going to get fame and fortune by writing a novel, right? But I do think in general, they're more driven by storytelling and the craft side of it, maybe. I feel like I'm not really getting to the heart of your question, but I will address something you said a minute ago about the marketing part. I think that's also something that is certainly a difference between, like, that picture of E.B. White and certainly in the past, where really the writer's job, the author's job, was to create something of value for the reader. And then it was the publisher's job to package the book into something that was, a product. And it was the marketer's job to market the book and sell the book. And now there's so much pressure on authors to think like business people. And I think that's wise in a lot of ways. I'm very business oriented myself, but I think that is something that has really crushed the spirit of a lot of writers. And a lot of people who come to me say, I just want to write. I don't want to have to think about that. And them being forced to think about that because they're in this ecosystem that's all about the author doing everything they can to also market their book and bring money in, really sucks their creative energy away. And I think that's a really bad thing. I would really like to see us get into a better balance where those authors who really want to do the business part and the writing part can go and do their thing, like in the self-publishing world. I mean, there's some awesome writers who are doing it all, and they're great at that. But to create that lane again and carve out that space for craftspeople who really just want to spend all their time digging into the craft and digging deep into themselves to say, what is it that I'm really trying to say? And why does it matter? And to whom does it matter?
Beautifully said, because that's deep and that's powerful because it's real. That means to say there is an intention, and that intention must be authentic, that you're there because your life has changed and you want the person reading it. So talk to me and talk to all of us. I mean, you mentioned in your discussions before that the writer or the author is the avatar. Who is the reader to you?
So in a memoir, I see the author's journey as the hero's journey as it is in memoir, or excuse me, as it is in fiction. So the author in a memoir serves as the reader avatar. And then the reader is putting themselves kind of in the shoes of the author and going through that arc with the author and going through that. And it's a way for them to kind of test the waters and say, oh yeah, I'm in a similar situation. I like how this author thinks and the actions, the decisions that they made when they were under pressure that's the person that I want to be. Or, oh, wow, yeah, they made those mistakes. Man, I could see how I could make the same mistakes in that situation. How do I learn from what the author's going through so I don't make those mistakes in the future? So if the author can be that avatar for the reader, that's a much more powerful, that's where the reader and the author are having that conversation as the author writes their story and moves the reader through
Right.
that narrative arc.
Right. So let's say in life's arc, in life's script, when does one really decide, I want to write a memoir? Because suddenly it seems to be the buzz of the last 10 years, 15, 20 years. Everybody wants to write a memoir. And for me, it never dawned on me. I mean, it was so studded with failures and flaws that couldn't see anything else outside of the mirror. But it was a time when, you hit a crisis or your life has just gone. And I don't think everybody wants to wait till the age of 70 and start writing memoirs, because they'll be too late and anything can happen and it will be incomplete. But is there an age where someone dawns and just decides time to write one? I mean, when does that turning point in life happen?
Yeah, it's funny. It happens for different people at different times, and there's different motivations. So one of the things that I come across often is people will come to me, or when I'm at a party or someplace social and people ask me what I do and I start to describe that, they'll say, when I tell people my story, people say, oh, you should write a book, meaning a memoir, right? And I think that I've only seen that work out a couple of times and work out well. I think that writing a great memoir is something that bubbles up inside of a person and they can't not do it. But there's a powerful motivation for it, because it usually is that they have gone through, well, there's two reasons. The good one, and I'm making a value judgment here, so anybody can disregard if they don't agree with me. But the one that I see as the good motivation is that they've gone through this traumatic thing and they've really learned and grown and wrestled with themselves and made a significant change. And it's all, they're like a mentor, and they say, man, here, I see this need out there, that there's other people going through this thing. I have a unique experience and I have something that I would love to share with people to help them, either to be a support for them as they walk through their journey, or to be a mentor in some ways to them as kind of a warning of like, hey, you don't want to go down this path. And so that to me is like a really good, powerful motivation. There's another motivation that I see a lot in memoir, and that is somebody who wants to just rant and they feel like they've been abused in some kind of a way and they just want to get back at people. So to me, like I said, I'm making a value judgment here. I think that's a poor motivation for writing a memoir, but it's definitely a motivation that I see often. And I'll just leave it at that. And you can ask me more questions about that if you want me to, or we can move on.
No, because you've hit a point in the intangible aspect of it, and that is intention.
Yeah.
Because if you have the wrong intention, it's going to rub off in the wrong way. Sorry, you're saying?
No, and that was another thing that you said about as a doctor, as a surgeon, first do no harm. I 100% agree with that, because to me, so I grew up in a home without a television. We had hundreds and hundreds of books. So we didn't have a television until I was 17 years old. So I have this almost religious thing about books and authors. So to me, books are special things, and authors are special people. And so to me, when I see somebody kind of come on that turf and do something with those tools, you can kill someone with a scalpel, or you can change their life for the better. The same thing with books. So when I see somebody come on to kind of my turf, wielding the same tools that I wield and others wield to try to make the world a better place and to ease people's suffering, and they're contributing to that suffering and tearing things down, I get really mad about that. I have really strong feelings about that. I don't like it.
Yeah, point taken. I mean, if you'll take it in and let it make its own turf, in someone's life, listening in. But now I just want to quickly clarify something. So I'm writing my memoir. So do I call myself a writer, or is it after the book is published and then I say I'm an author?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There are many different perspectives on this. Mine is that you are not an author until the book is published and you can hold it in your hand or it's for sale. And the reason for that is twofold. One is, so a lot of people will encourage people who are writing their books to call themselves authors to kind of fulfill that aspiration. It's a very aspirational thing. I don't disagree with the motivation behind that, but what happens is, if that person is not writing as fast as they think they should be, if they have any kind of guilt that they're not making progress, that label of author actually becomes something that creates shame for them, because they're like, I'm not fulfilling that moniker. The other thing is, if you're talking to somebody and you describe yourself as an author, their expectation is that they could go and purchase your book straight away. So if they say, oh, that's great, where can I buy your book? Then you have to backtrack and explain, well, I mean, it's not actually out yet. I'm in the process of writing this thing. And then there's another side of it for me that's just sort of a respect of the profession. And if somebody described themselves as a doctor or a surgeon and they had not finished their training and they had not gotten their certifications, I mean, people would laugh at them. So it's funny to me how we think that in a creative field, we can kind of massage these phrases and use them. To me, it's not authentic to say that you're an author if you haven't actually fulfilled the mandate of an author, which is to finish a book and have it up for sale. That's the short answer.
No, and it makes sense. And it takes out the whole imposter stuff to it. You're
Yes,
walking around.
right.
And
Yep.
and so I'm going to tell my girls to stop putting the book around so I can carry it around. But Cristen, what you are saying are gold nuggets, because it is a journey. And it's so unfortunate that in this part of the world, nobody is out there really telling the story and spilling the beans, because it's not so much of an art, but like you said, it's a craft. And that's something that we can learn, as opposed to being difficult to be taught. I mean, you got to learn the trade to be able to do it. And so I'm so delighted that I've met you in my life on this journey of putting this book out. And I can tell you one thing, I'm going to run all over town with the book and say, look, it's here. Those days in England during the war, here's the press, out from the press, latest, take the latest. And I'm going to stand somewhere in town with a kind of thing and tell my girls, go, yeah, get the book, it's out, it's hot, But, Cristen, one of the first subjects we learned in medicine is called anatomy. Mm-hmm. And if you don't study the anatomy, the physiology, and the biochemistry, you're out of the system. You don't know where you are. And so I want to just now drift. We have taken us to the spirit of the era of the writer behind the writer kind of thing, the mind behind the mind. And now we come into the mechanics of it, the anatomy of it. And I know that there's so much we can learn from you. But what's the goal? How does one decide the goal into the end point? Is that goal where I want to go and where I want to end? Or is it a goal of where I want to take the reader to start with and where the reader is going to end? Because I can tell you one thing, you made a statement, which to me is absolutely powerful. It shook me. It took me a while. I just sat put for about 5 minutes when you said, at the end, the reader wins. And I always thought that it's me winning at the end because, yeah, I did it, that kind of feeling, right? But when you said that, I said, now this girl is different. I mean, you're looking in it totally from a reader's mind. And what does it do to someone else? That interaction, that interplay between two souls that are trying to find purpose in life. So talk to us about the importance of vision of where this book wants to go. How does one deal with that?
Yeah, I like to reverse engineer things. So I think with memoir, it's great because we know the arc of our story. We know our life. So it's unlike a novelist who might have to think about, they might not always have the end in mind when they write the book. Memoirists typically have a pretty good idea of what they want to talk about. So I recommend to my clients, and when I teach workshops, is to, step back and think about who is it that is, from a reader's perspective, who is it that's going to want and need or be interested in your story? What are they suffering through right now? What is going to bring them to your story? And what is it about you as a human being, as a whole person, that's going to connect with them as a human being and as a whole person? And really, the way that the reader wins in the end is that you are connected to them, and you are the reader avatar. So they are seeing themselves go alongside with you. Just like when we watch a film, the whole idea is that the film hooks the viewer in to align themselves with the protagonist, and then they experience the highs and lows with the protagonist. And if the protagonist wins in the end, the viewer feels like they've won in the end. If something bad happens to the protagonist in the end, the viewer still might be satisfied with the movie, but there's that emotional thing, like as if it happened to them. So if we're always thinking about who am I serving when I write this book, and thinking about the details of my story and the little bits and pieces that are best going to speak to those people, then we can really start to develop a decision-making rubric that helps us to weed through a lifetime of experiences and possibilities that we could put into this memoir. Especially the older we get, the more we have to choose from and the more daunting it can be.
Telling me.
But I will say that for the most part, I do think that the better memoirs come from people who are 40 and above, because there is more depth of experience and they've had more time to think about things and experiment with things and figure out what works for them, what aligns with their belief system, all of that. Not that a younger person can't write a good memoir. I've read some by younger people, but it's typically a more survivor memoir kind of a thing. It's a very narrow thing, and it doesn't go as deep into the psyche of a person and their relationships. That's a generalization, but I do think that the older we get, the better we can write, because we have more of a well to pull from.
Yeah, and drink from. And so if I'm hearing you right, Cristen, that the topic is more important than the author in memoir. Would that be correct?
I think so.
Yeah, because like, for example, it goes both ways. I remember sometimes you look at some of the top bestsellers, the topic is not something that somebody will be looking for, but it's either the subtitle or something else that draws it in. And the topic might be way out. But when does one decide on the topic? Is it at the end of it, when it's all over and say, okay, this is something, or right in the beginning, I'm going to write about this?
Yeah, to me, it's in the beginning. So this kind of brings up the conversation about plotters and pansters, pansters. Have you heard those phrases?
No, pranksters, yes, but not pansters.
So in the US, at least, there's this phrase about plotters, and they're the people who plan everything or most things from the beginning, and they know what they're going to write, and then they write it. And then there's the pantsters who write from the seat of their pants. That's the expression.
Okay.
They just dive in and just follow their bliss, follow their whatever they want to do. And those are two opposite approaches, and they can both work equally well. This is why I think you have to figure out how your brain works and what your preference is. For me, I'm a plotter. So, and as a developmental editor, you can teach plotting because it's anatomy. You can teach anatomy where you can't teach about pantstering because it's very ethereal, right? So what I say is, okay, you've got to figure out what exactly is it that you're trying to talk about, because you've got this lifetime of experiences to choose from. So we've got to narrow the scope, and it's going to typically be something that you're going to have. It's similar to fiction. It's going to follow the hero's journey. You know, what was the inciting incident? What was that big moment where something changed in your life, either a tragedy or an opportunity, that set you on this course that you're going to describe to the reader? And where does that story start and where does it end? So I'll just give you an example because that can be kind of hard to pin down. So one of my clients is a Black police officer in the Midwest, and he was fired from his job and then he got reinstated. So that story really started before he got hired as a police officer, what his plans for his life were before that, what led him to join the police force, the arc of his career, then these things happening along the way that set him up for this big crisis when he got fired, and then how he turned that around and got reinstated. And then the book ends just right after he retired. So we had this nice narrative arc, and we knew exactly where we were going to start the story and where the story was going to end. And everything in the middle, when we asked ourselves, like, should this go in there? Should this go in there? It was like, yeah. Well, what does that have to do with the story that we're telling, which is about, you know, systemic racism in the United States, even in the police force, and from the perspective of a Black police officer in the midst of, you know, culturally, when police officers we're hearing more about police officers negatively impacting the Black community, that kind of thing, right? So right. He had a unique perspective as a Black police officer, and we were telling a specific story. So I always say you've got to figure that out, because you're also not going to know who your reader is unless you know what story you're going to tell. And so that way it was like we knew exactly who would be interested in this book. You would have police officers that would be interested in his perspective. You would have people who are interested in, like, the social justice movement and you know, equality and civil rights. So there were very specific demographics of people that we could pinpoint that would be interested in a book like this, looking for it. And we knew that they would win in the end because we had started it in the right place and we ended it in the right place.
Oh, that's a powerful illustration of that arc, that journey. Because now, so is the narrative arc and the character arc the same? Because it's the character that tells the story and pulls the reader all the way through, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so that's the other thing, is a lot of times people think that it's about what's happening around them, and that's what the story is about. But that's not what the story is about. The story is what happens in you, not to you, because you can put the same two people or different people in the same situation. One of them is going to figure out a way to get through that. You know, another one won't grow at all. They'll just grouse and moan or whatever and won't grow. So different people are going to deal with the same situation in different ways. That's the magic of it. And so actually what you were saying a bit ago about, is it the topic that's the most important? Actually, it's not, because that's just the situation. It's it's what happens to the person. It's that personal growth, that character arc, that's the most important. And that's why you can read something or talk to somebody and they can have this super dramatic story that's all drama, but it's not interesting at all because it's all drama and no growth. And then you can have somebody who is like in the most boring of circumstances, but something about the way that they think about it and the way that they grew through it is mesmerizing, and you could listen to them for hours, and it's kind of surprising because you're like, but it seems so boring because there's no fireworks, there's no fighting, there's no whatever, you know.
Yeah, I mean, really, this is, these are so important issues which I'm going through, of where to put the block in and what to do first. And powerful, you recommended a book, and I was just looking at the synopsis of it. And it was this lady who had a triple amputee, and who had met with a crash. And it's the title doesn't draw you as much as the subtitle and how she struggled through it, being you know what I mean. And it's stuff like that really takes you out of your seat and want to go and sit in a corner somewhere and take you. But let's look within that arc. I struggle with this part of it because I think no book cannot be written without emotions. Somewhere along the line, the whole emotional vulnerability of the writer becomes exposed. And every time I go into that area, I get up and go for another glass of wine. And so by the time I'm finished, I'm too high to write anything else. And now tell me, Cristen, listen to me. There are many who are in that position of struggling to get into how deep do I go? And does the reader want to know how deep that is? Because you don't want to leave the reader halfway down the cave and tell them, okay, go the rest of the journey and see, you figure it out, what happened, that kind of thing, right? How do you go in so deep and yet come out, but still lost? Are you able to feel me where I'm going with this?
I think so. So I like to think about it from screenwriting. So a lot of what informs my process as a writer and an editor of nonfiction is studying fiction and screenwriting in particular. So in screenwriting, there's this idea about the viewer of a movie is seeing something from the third person, from an outside view. And the only way that they know what's going on inside characters' heads and what they're feeling emotionally is by the actions that the characters take. And I really like that because the phrase is action shows character. And I think that if memoirists think about it that way, and they approach writing and they write in scenes, and they stop focusing so much on telling the reader, I was really mad, I was really sad, I was depressed. What did that look like? If you weren't allowed to tell the reader how you were feeling or what your mind was going through, how would you show them that on the screen?
Right.
And it's actually a lot easier than you think because people are pretty transparent actually when they're going through stuff, even if they don't see it. And I'm sure many people can resonate with this. For me, when I'm really mad or overwhelmed with something and I don't know what to do, I get very quiet. I will go and clean. I will go off by myself for a couple hours, but I will make the choice to disengage from humans and do something with my hands, right? Well, most people, if they see the lead up to that kind of behavior, and then you show them that, they have enough experience in and of their own self or with other people around them that they go, oh, I know what she's thinking.
Yeah,
and
right.
You don't want to hear it out loud. But you know what I'm saying? So I think that can be a way for the writer to step back from what they're writing, to look at it and go, okay, if I was looking at this on a movie screen, is there enough action that I've written in, enough interaction between people to show what I'm feeling and what I'm going through? And that's enough. And I think that's the other thing, is that sometimes we do want to be authentic and we do want to give a lot of ourselves, but sometimes you can just go too much. You've made the point as far as the reader's concerned, and you can move on. But there's just that sense of, well, I can always go deeper and deeper and deeper. And then we just get into where, your memoir is 200,000 words and wanders all over the place.
Yeah, right.
So does that help answer the question?
No. I tell you that takes you out from the labyrinth of being lost. The last thing you want to do is get the reader into a lostness that sometimes they may not be able to come back at all and go and get another book to read. But yeah, beautifully illustrated. And you mentioned something, the hero's journey, as opposed to a hero story. The word story sometimes puts me off because it's like once upon a time kind of thing, what I mean? But a journey is, where does this end? What's the destination? So that hero's journey, does every arc need to be a hero's journey?
No, but most books and most memoirs are a hero's journey.
Okay.
Because they just are. People read memoirs to learn something, to grow. If it's the story that somebody's telling of things that went wrong and it ends on now I'm destitute and I have no friends, no family, I've completely screwed up my life. That's a cautionary tale, but the reader doesn't win in the end. It's like, oh, wow, I've invested all of this time and energy into this author in this story. What am I supposed to do with this?
Right.
And so there's no reciprocity in a story like that. So there's some excellent novels and screenplays and things that do have a negative arc, but they're satisfying in their own way. And they illustrate points about humanity and our lived experience in a different way. To me, memoir, I'm trying to think of a memoir that doesn't follow the hero's journey, and nothing is coming to mind.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you. It's really so much about, at the end of the day, your destination and where you want to take the reader. I remember saying, I tell you something, I watch Netflix quite a bit when I'm stuck writing. And it's amazing how those scenes of every, they interplay, especially the ones that have seasons to them. And it's magic, because before I can want to get up and go, I'm pressing the next one, the next episode, you see. So because it leaves you hanging, and I think it's a brilliant way. There's another movie that I saw on Netflix called Where the Crawdad Sings, or something like that.
Oh, yep.
Oh, perfect. And at the end of the day, it's in the poem, that she's the one who did it. So I think it makes life fascinating when you can write it. If life is one's biggest project, why not write it?
Yeah. And I think that when we step back and think about memoir as the hero's journey, then we start to think of our life as a hero's journey. And we can, now maybe it's just me, because sometimes I have a hard time figuring out how I feel about things, and it's hard for me to process some things. I'm a delayed processor in a lot of ways, and I'm very analytical. So for me, once I started to really learn about the hero's journey and I started thinking, oh, wait, this applies to memoir, then I'm thinking, okay, well, you could actually just apply this to your own life and say, oh, I just had this thing happen to me. If I was the subject of a movie, if I was, this character in a movie, or if I was going to write a memoir about this, what would my goal through this be? And what are the steps that I would need to take to reach that goal? And then when something really bad happens, you almost get weirdly excited about it, because you go, oh, this is going to be great, because you have to have those ups and downs in a hero's journey, so you can think, oh, well, where's this going to fit into my narrative arc? How am I going to get out of this one in a way that's satisfying to me and can make for a good story later? So I suppose in a way, it's a way to gamify your life and
Yeah.
kind of compartmentalize.
Yeah, while you're saying this, it reminds me of someone who plays the piano accordion, you go blow the whole thing out. And then swings it on, and there's music every time they do that. But and it also reminds me of how life can have its humor and yet its shame. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, and the curtain has come down, and you've got this book, where does a publisher come in?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways that people do it. One is the manuscript first approach, which is what I really like. In nonfiction, you can also do just a book proposal, which is really just an outline of the book, an overview of what the whole narrative arc is going to be, and then chapter synopses. And you can pitch that to publishers. And sometimes they'll say, okay, yep, we want to do that. And then they'll tell you, go off and write the book. So that's one way to do it. The other approach, like I said, that I prefer is the manuscript first approach. And that is finish the book, figure out what it really is and what you really want to say, and then pitch it to a publisher and go from there. And so there are pros and cons. That's a deeper conversation. Happy to talk more about that, but that's kind of the first level answer.
Okay. So listen, we've been through different emotional ups and downs in writing a book. And I can tell you one thing, it's no easy task. And what you have shared today is really, really, for me, is a nuggets upon nuggets, and I want to thank you so much, Cristen. I know that this is going to kind of stimulate many who are getting up from the seat. And, I think discipline is also another thing, right? Go sit down and write, that kind of thing.
Well, I like to think about it this way. So you're right, discipline, but sometimes there's this thing called demand avoidance. And I think most people suffer from it, some of us more than others. And that is when we feel like there's a task that we're supposed to do, something in our brain goes, I'm not doing that. And there it puts up a barrier. So if we reframe it, and this is where I think always thinking about why you're doing something and keeping the reader in mind, if you have this strong pull of, man, I know that this could help these people and save them a lot of pain. And if your motivation is coming from that place, I think that's actually going to get you to sit down and do this because now you're out of yourself. You're out of your own insecurities and selfish motivations, and you're doing something for someone else. And that can often have a stronger pull to keep us in the seat. The other thing is that I think too many people, especially first-time writers, think that professional writers sit down and they write a book from start to finish, and then they hand it to a publisher and it's beautiful. And there's another phrase that I love, and that is writing is revising. And I hate to write the first draft of a book. Absolutely hate it. It is misery. It is torture, but I love, love, love to revise. And that's where the magic actually happens. So if you can just know that, yeah, you know what, whatever I'm going to put on the paper today is going to be terrible, but that's okay, because once I'm done, I'm going to circle back and fix it. And I'm doing it for the reader. It becomes easier and the motivation is there. And it's not something you just have to say, well, I'm going to discipline myself today and make myself sit in the chair because that's what I'm supposed to do. Because, I'm going to treat myself like a 4-year-old. I don't know. I just think it honors where you are in that moment, and it honors the relationship that you have or that you want between yourself and your reader.
Oh, well said, well taken, and well absorbed, because it means so much. And, let's end here with who's your model writer or model author? Somebody that, sticks in your mind. And the reason why I'm asking is because sometimes you can read a book and it just sinks in, I mean, it is like there's so much, so deep that as a surgeon myself, and how we had to go back to the World War I and understand how this man orchestrated and came up with flaps and reconstruction. As a trade that you are so, magnificent in, does one person come to your mind that, look, I love the way this man or this lady writes, is there a model that you kind of like comes to mind?
I think that Cheryl Strayed's memoir, Wild, is one that sticks in my mind because structurally, like the bones of it, like you were talking about, the anatomy of that book is so good. And the journey that she went through and the way that she talks about it, everything about that book to me is fantastic. It really stuck out to me.
Wild.
As far as Wild by Cheryl Strayed, and it's one that's, gosh, it's probably 10 or more years old, but that's a book that sticks in my mind for many good reasons. And then Cormac McCarthy's apocalyptic novel, The Road, is the most devastatingly beautiful book I've ever read. And it's really the story about the love a father has for his son. And it's just absolutely stunning and very difficult to read, but as a parent, it resonates with me. But there are so many good authors, and this is where I feel bad as a professional. I actually don't remember the authors of books very often. I remember the stories and the structure of a book more than I'll be able to recall the author.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's like, Mozart, so you remember the symphony, or you remember the piece that moves you so much and takes you so deep. But anyway, well done. But give me the second one again.
Cormac McCarthy.
Cormac McCarthy. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
And the book is called The Road.
Right. So we'll have that all up in the transcript so that people can just get to it. And well, I could talk to you the whole year.
I love talking to you.
But I hope you enjoyed yourself. Now, listen, how do those listening in get to you, Cristen? Because I mean, the whole world, I want the whole world to know that there's a girl called Cristen Iris. She looks into someone else's iris. How do they get to you? I mean, you mentioned you have a website, cristeniris.com.
I do. cristeniris.com, and it's spelled CRISTENIRIS.com. I also have a YouTube channel, which I'm going to be putting a lot more videos on in the next couple of months. So
nice.
Hang tight. There's some up there, but it's getting revamped. But that's a good way to have those kinds of things. But also on my website, on my speaking page, people can go down and there's a list of past events, and many of them are podcasts or video conversations like this. So they can actually go, like I'll be putting this one on that page too, so that people can go to your YouTube channel and watch it there as well. Wonderful.
Well done. And before we kind of say bye-bye to you, which I just don't like, tell something to somebody like me, a first-time person writing, it doesn't write before, non-professional kind of thing. Just give us a couple of sentences that we can kind of like take hold and be confident, because that's the first important intangible that needs to be on set, and that is have the confidence to do it and finish it.
I think it would be to think like a child, in that when you're first learning to speak, children don't have most children don't have any barrier or shame when they come to using those new words. They're just excited to use those new words and they just spew them out. And it's okay if they're in the wrong order and their grammar's not right. We get it. And as they learn and grow, and in the craft of speaking and communicating, their grammar, their syntax, all of that stuff gets better. So you've never done this before. You're not supposed to know what to do, and you're not going to know what to do until you've completely done it, and you can look back and assess the things that worked for you and that didn't work for you. it is a craft. So it is, there are some principles to it, but you can come to it in your own way. And the only way to is through. So just have fun.
That's right. Have fun. And well, I'm having fun with you as long as you're nearby and, and walking down the road with me. So now let me end, Cristen. I read this morning, but it's actually part of the book on Writing Well by William Zinsser. And he writes in a paragraph here by Henry David Thoreau, who wrote the book called Walden.
Mhm.
And this is the words of Henry. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I have not lived. I mean, to me, that is, it sums up the whole, spirit of writing and why do you want to write your memoir. And so on that note, I want to wish you all the very best. Thank you so much for joining us on Hard Talk. And
Well, thank you for having me.
it's been an enormous pleasure. And I know that you'll be the first person I will hope to read the book and then tell me, go write again. So, and I'll be glad, because writing is about rewriting.
That's right. You'll have fun, I promise.
And I'm proud and promise. So from all of us here, from Mary and Heidi, thank you once again, and have a wonderful evening. And for those of you who have just listened to this whole episode, we've been an hour together. I could go on the whole day with Cristen, but you can imagine the wealth of an enormous experience she comes from. So once again, thank you for joining us on Hard Talk, and we'll talk again. Hi everyone, this is Dr. Charles Lee. Before this episode starts, I have a small favor to ask from you. Many visit and watch the videos and they find it very informative. They get excited. Some of them write to me on my email, but they don't subscribe. So would you do me a small favor? Would you just press that subscribe button? It'll be so good for all of us. Certainly it helps the channel grow. It adds a little bit of vitality to the channel. At the same time, the numbers get bigger, and my heart gets bigger too. So just to know that you're with me, you enjoy the company, and I enjoy your company, you won't believe it. So please subscribe, press that button. I want to hear those bells jingle. And most of all, stay tuned, and I love your company. We'll talk again.